profile, set your goals, plan to improve, and then implementing the plan. And you've got an action plan. We've got resources on our website that will help you with each one of these areas. I think probably where we fall apart is here. And I'm not saying we as the Department of Ed or you as schools, I'm talking about we as people, as human beings. I think we sometimes do a great job here and then we hit here, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this is where the critical conversations have to happen. The reflecting and the collaborating that so many people, and you guys, as I'm presenting this, I think about districts, and again, I think of us as human beings and in life in general. How often do we sit back and just reflect on where we are, where we want to go, and how are we going to get there? It's so hard to take the time to do that as human beings and as districts. So this is where we really need to focus, and you need to focus when you're talking with your districts. The first thing you have to do is develop that mission. And if you don't have the tough, critical, reflective conversations at that time, then that mission is going to become the same kind of mission I talked about that I see in schools, where it's a piece of paper up on the superintendent's wall and in a couple places throughout the school, but nobody's living it. So right here, this is where you have to develop your mission. So in very, very simplistic terms, I think about something personally with me. Wasn't feeling well here a while ago. So I had to just kind of stop and think, okay, Kim, what's going on in your life? Reflect a little bit and figure out what's going on here. I had a mission. I wanted to feel better. So I set kind of a mission. I had to collect the data. Where am I not feeling well? Well, let's see. Let's think back a little bit. I've got a few headaches here. I've got this going on. I got this going on. What's going on? So I had to collect that data. So you as a district, you've got to think of, what is your mission? So right now, think of your own mission. Probably got a mission statement. What is that mission that you have? And then what data do you have that tells you, that even applies to that mission? That's the part that you need to take back to your staff and say, okay, what are you doing that applies to that mission? And that's not an easy conversation to have, because they might say, well, I give this test and I give this. Yeah, but what is that data telling us? How does that apply to our mission? How does our mission apply to your data? Those are the conversations you need to have. Then after you get that data, you got to display it, and you got to have people dive into it and dig into it. So if I'm not feeling well, I got to figure out where I'm not feeling well, and I got to set all that stuff out in front of me and look at that and go, Have those critical, reflective conversations about that data, and see if that, maybe somebody's going to say, oh, I guess what I'm doing there doesn't apply to that mission. I don't know if they'll say that, but they might. Or they might say, oh, wow, that looks like that really applies to that mission statement. So those are the things, hopefully, that they'll have the conversation about. Once you analyze that data, then you've got to prioritize. You can't necessarily do all the things that everybody's doing, or you might need to add some more things. You just kind of have to you have to figure out what works best for your district. So without thinking about other districts, without thinking about, have people, I guess the way I should say it is, get people more in a community mindset as opposed to just silos of data. See if they can see how it applies with each other towards that mission statement. So once you do that, you've got to determine your goals. So when I actually went through this process, I figured out that it was my blood pressure that had kind of jacked way high here right before I started this new job. So I hope it's down now, right? So right before I started, that's what happened, was I had finished a college degree and I hadn't taken care of myself, and my blood pressure was way up. So I had to determine what I wanted my goals to be. And I knew that I had been always borderline blood pressure, so I wanted to get it back down. So my goal was to get that blood pressure right at the borderline. So what's the blood pressure of your district? Where do you want that blood pressure to be? Where do you want that goal to be? That's what you set. And then, of course, what am I going to do with my blood pressure? I'm going to go out and research the best possible ways to lower that blood pressure. And I got to warn you, folks, once you set those goals, reading, math, whatever it is, you need to get out there and find what's out there. So many schools, I've noticed, they've had a certain way of doing things all these years, and because it's worked in the past, they think it's going to continue to work. It may not. There might be something out there that works better, or there might not be. But you got to do that research. You know, if you go online, you're going to be inundated with so many different ways of teaching reading, improving math scores, or whatever it is you're working on. You've got to do your research to figure out what's the best fit for your school. Right? That's a tough one to do. It's a tough one to do. One of the schools I went to visit here just recently, I asked them about their professional development with their staff members. And they said, oh yeah, we have no trouble hitting that 10 hours. I said, you got something that works best for your district? What do you do? And he said, well, our teachers research, find out what they want for professional development, and we trust that whatever they learn at that professional development, they're going to bring back to the district, and they're going to help us know what it was about and how that would, whether it fits with our district or not. So a lot of it is just they want to go see other teachers in other districts that they know have been stellar in that area or whatever. Or just maybe a small conference that's somewhere in the state, or sometimes out of state conferences. And then they trust those staff members to come back and share with the staff. And he said sometimes they come back and say, well, this is what I saw. I don't think it'll fit with our district, but maybe someday, you know, it's just kind of eye-opening, he said, to when they bring in those different ideas. That's how they do it. I'm not saying that's a fit for every district, but I thought it worked well for them. And they were really living that process. So then the next thing, after you research and you find what works best for you, you've got to determine what you want your measures of success to be. I want my blood pressure to be at borderline again. I don't know if I can get it any lower. That would be great, but I got to make it kind of reachable too, right? And then you've got to write your action plan, which means I've got to select strategies. And that's where we fall apart, because one of those strategies that I had to select for my blood pressure was I needed to lose weight. Yeah, right. I needed to exercise, and I needed to lower my salt intake. Well, I just fell apart. I didn't want to do those things. So I didn't necessarily do all those things. And so my blood pressure is still way up there. That's where, as school districts, where's your buy-in? You got to have buy-in. If you did your critical conversations here and you continued them all the way through here, then buy-in here shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't be. Easier said than done, right? Way easier said than done. But please have those critical conversations here and see what you could do with buy-in here. Select those strategies and help people know that they can tweak those strategies to whatever works for them. And then once you have collected your data, you need to adjust and update. And that's where you've got your evaluation piece that's so incredibly important to the process. This, as human beings, folks, this is where we fall apart. But in the continuous improvement process, this is where you and your staff need to live, right here. Get there all the way around and then live right here. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you have any questions about that? Other than, how do we do this? Any questions? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. All right, so this is what the website, the school improvement process website looks like, so that especially if you're a framework school, this is where I'm going to show you a little bit later. But then here's all of your other stuff. Is there anything that you wanted to point out here today right now, or did you want to wait and point out?
Should you show them how to get to that?
I will show the frameworks, folks. So that would be a good idea. I would rather you be in here, because I do know that the last time I presented, some of the districts told me that some of the things, but it's just dependent on your browser. So if you can't get one of them open, try another browser, and most generally it's been successful. So we will get to this in a little bit. Okay, all righty. Okay, so you're going to have a school profile if you don't already, and it's going to be a description of your school's current reality, and you're going to have separate lenses, 4 separate lenses. So you're going to have, here they are, student performance, program data, and perceptions. So very quickly, those are the 4 areas that I'm going to talk about: student performance, demographics, program data, and perceptions. So sources of student performance. So you've got your norm reference, criterion reference, portfolio summative data, IEP achievement data, and achievement from other non-core subjects. And this is all collected at the beginning of the school improvement process during those interventions that were up in the wheel that we were talking about, the graphic, and then at the end of the interventions. And then that's how you know if your action plan is working. And once those interventions are achieved or are implemented, you back up, you do another evaluation, see if it's working, you adjust, and you go right back into it again. You just keep going right back and forth into that area on the wheel again. Questions about student performance data? This is kind of where I'm opening it up too. So any questions about that? Don, did you want to add?
Well, with non-publics, as you know, you don't have the NISA as far closer to you.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
The NISA scores, and so it is a little more difficult. You do have to do a little more searching maybe for your student data. I know you have the Archdiocese of Omaha assessments that are given across all of the school districts, so you have that common assessment, but I understand it's not as easy to read or use the data as maybe they're hoping to move in that direction. But you do have a common assessment that you can use. And then under Rule 10, you do have to have a norm reference test. So you're doing Terra Nova or ITBS or MAP or something that has been norm referenced. And so that's probably your primary one. And then you're free to use other assessments if you're elementary, like DIBELS, if you DIBEL, or used to be your ACT scores. That's, as a high school, you Access, is that what it's called? Aspire. Yeah, there are some other assessments that are available for upper levels also. And so you probably have a lot of classroom assessments. I know that some of you have developed some writing assessments. Just keep in mind that when you start dabbling in assessments, a lot of times reliability and so forth, it's, you just kind of have to take that and really look at it and see what it's telling you when you're actually designing. But it's okay. We're not saying you don't do that, but just understand that they're not probably as consistent as a norm reference.
Okay, thanks, Don. Okay, also then the next one is sources of demographic data. So you have your enrollment and attendance, free and reduced lunch information, English ELL stuff, transportation information, suspension, expulsion data, preschool data, agenda data, high ability data. Can you think of anything else for demographics? Okay, I'm going to continue then, if there's not any questions. And hopefully this is all something that you can converse about here in just a little bit. Program data, course enrollment and sequences, alternative programs, graduation rates, extra and co-curricular participation, student-teacher ratio, teacher credentials data, staff professional development data. Is there anything else in this area that anybody's using that you would like to share out? And this is good because I'm starting to hear whispers, so that means teams are starting to talk about what they're seeing and what they, so hopefully hold those thoughts, because that's stuff we want you to talk about. And then sources of perceptual data, parent surveys, student surveys, school climate data, parent community volunteerism in the school. I was in one school, a principal was so of an instrument that he had developed, or a spreadsheet that he had developed. He didn't even do it on the computer. It was a handwritten, it was a bigger school, you guys, but he took that on. He said, I want to know what our kids can do. So he had just made this huge worksheet where he had columns and rows for each student, and the column were every piece of perceptual data that he could gather on kids. He would do the 5-finger. He'd walk out quick and hit 5 students a day. Just very quickly, he'd walk out. Tell me one thing that your teacher does that makes you feel good. And he'd take 5 kids and he'd put that information down. And then the next day he'd walk out there and say, tell me one thing that your teacher did great today. And then he'd take those kids. And then he'd say, tell me one thing that we can improve in the mornings or something like that. And every day he was going out there and catching 5 students just at random. Didn't care who they were, just picked 5 students. And he tracked that data. And he said he had been given that idea from a teacher who had gone out and seen it happening in another school. He picked up on it several years ago. He said, you would not believe the wealth of information that little 5-finger rule has done for our school. And he said, it takes me 2 seconds during a day to run out there quick and do that. So it's just an idea, but I think sometimes when we're thinking of data, we're thinking of tests, and we just think that that's all that we can look at, but it's not. There's a lot more out there that you can do. Okay. All right. So the data, when you display them, and I'm not going to get too deep into this, but please remember that when you're giving that data, when you're presenting that data, make sure that it's very easily understood. So one thing that I've always been told is that when you get finished putting all that data together and you've got this display out there, make sure that it's so simply understood that if somebody come along, finds a copy of it on the street and picks it up, they can understand what it is. We know that it's understandable in your mind, right? We all know what's in our own minds, but how do we get that across to everybody so that it's very easily understood? Also, obviously, make it neat in appearance. There's some suggestions. Make it accessible. So if you're doing the Google Docs, make sure it's accessible to people. Make sure it's reliable and also complete enough to stand alone. And then also, it should be very clear. And it should have all the necessary components. And this is the part that I've had lots of questions on, where it should be statements of facts only and keep the judgments out. This is a question that I got, and it's hard to do that, but I had a person raise their hand one time and they said, okay, so we are a very small district and we only have 10 third graders. And we took our assessment, we had an assessment, and 3 of our third graders are severely special education, and they just don't take tests well, and our scores just dropped like crazy. So I said, yeah. They said, well, that's why our scores are so low in third grade, and every year you can see it. I said, and? They said, well, you want us just to put the facts. And I said, well, that's a fact. Isn't it? That's a fact. It's not a judgment. It's a fact that they had 3 struggling students out of 10, and they could see through their data, they could see the trend that those kids were struggling every year. They saw their scores dip a little bit because they had those 3 kids that struggled mightily. That's a fact, folks. So don't think it just has to be. So keep that in mind, okay? You know your schools better than anybody else does. So what are you going to tell people about your school? Tell people about your school. And that was a fact in that school. Okay. Any questions? Don, did you have anything you want to add? No. Okay. All right. So I think I guess the question is, and I don't know if we want to go into this now or if we want to, sorry, I'm going to go ahead just a little bit. I'm trying to think this is something that I want to do this morning or if I want to do later. I was going to do it after break, but I'll go ahead and do it very quickly here. So does your school have a good profile? Do you already have, for lack of a better word, do you already have a dashboard? Do you have something where you can look and anybody in your school or your stakeholders can look and they can see what your school is all about? Because if you don't have that, you need to get that in place in order for school improvement to happen. You need to have that display of what your school, how are you going to sell your school and what it's all about to the people who are invested in that school. So what steps could you take to make that profile better if you already have one? So again, these are just kind of questions that I'm trying to get the juices flowing in your brains here. Start thinking about what can you do? What if you don't have a profile, what do you need to do to get one in place? And if you do have, what can you do to make it better for those of us who are outside looking in? And also for those people who are in your district, look, what can you do? Yes? Are there some online?
There are not any online.
I mean, is this a profile that would be for the entire community, or just for the school community?
Would it be for your school community? You know, in your profile with being a Catholic school, you're going to be, you'll have a discussion about your parish, you know, and if you're supported by the parish, I guess you have different configurations here as far as parish supported, or sometimes you're two parishes together. That's good information to have as far as your demographics. So to make sure that you've kind of laid the groundwork of what is the environment that you're working under as far as your parish life. But community, I mean, you can add if that's you know, so maybe not the metro area, but the smaller school districts that are by Norfolk and so forth that are tied to the town. You might want to do that, or you may want to say that, you know, you're one of the belongs to the parish that's in the western part of Omaha too, and so that changes your demographics also. So anything that you can give the team a heads up on makes your school tick, or what makes you unique. I like the word unique. You know, what makes you you that's different than anybody else, and that may be your location and your parish that you're tied to, or that you're two parishes together.
So like I said, you guys know your schools better than anybody else looking in. So get together that information and put together information that will show people what your school is all about. That's your profile. And I realize that it's 10 o'clock. What I have left is the goal setting. Do you want me to continue or? Okay, so this will be very quick. So setting the goals, when you're setting your goals, here are the standards to keep in mind. Again, I know, easier said than done, but we've got to come at it from here and then dive into it. So you need to understand the present and chart the future. Too many times we don't take a look at the present. Too many times we're either set in the past or we just right away take a look at the future. We got to understand our present first. You got to figure out what's going on in your schools. You have to know so that you can chart that future. This is where the critical conversations come. You've got to figure out where you are in the present first. So an example would be all students will improve reading comprehension skills. So there's your performance goal, your academic goal. They've got, go ahead, Don.
Under Rule 10.
Sorry.
Under Rule 10, you do have to have one academic goal. That's the minimum. And so like the example here, all students will improve reading. You could stop with reading. It doesn't have to be reading comprehension, but it does need to be based upon your data. You know, what is your data telling you that you need to improve? But minimally, you have to have one academic goal. You may then have as many goals as you want that are not academic. They may be, you want to have your teachers all trained in certain
SRP, student response protocol.
There you go. And so that may be a goal that you would add to, but your first initial goal has to be an academic goal.
Okay, thank you, Don. And then obviously your WIGs, your wildly important goals. Does everyone in your district know them? So these are going to be your everybody has goals. All your teachers have goals. All you teachers have goals. Administrators has goals for every day when they walk into that school. But your wildly important goals, those ones that are going to drive your school improvement process, does everybody know what those goals are? And you might be surprised sometimes where you think they do, you might be surprised that either they don't know them because they weren't in the right mindset when they heard them, or they weren't involved in creating them, or they do know them, but they're not buying into them, or they don't understand. They have a different take on them. So a conversation about those goals, a continuous conversation about those goals is necessary. And do they feel a part of the process? That's a big part of the goal setting. And I think here you go. This is what Don was talking about, student performance and then learning opportunity. I think this is going to be, these are the ones I think that from a teacher perspective, I think we have a lot easier time with this because this is in the here and now. This I feel is like maybe more closely tied to my classroom. This one here I struggled because I was so busy struggling with what was going on in my classroom that to look at the big picture and look at the gaps in student data, that was really hard for me. I felt like this was more removed, but this is where we need to put our focus. These can build up to that, but this is going to be one of those wildly important ones. Okay, Don, did you want to add to that? Or okay, and I think that's it. So we'll talk about this. I'll talk about this later. You want to talk about
that's different than, this is kind of where we start the divide for advanced ed and frameworks as far as what you're using for your action plan. And so we'll stop here. We have ran a little bit over. I've already